So today is the World of Books. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Doha Muhammad is at the controls. This is World of Info from Radio Cairo 95.4 FM. Our telephone number, direct number, Studio 3 is 2578-9407. And we're with you here until 5 p.m. And today is the World of Books. Every once in a while we present some books, and today as usual we are presenting 4 books, and these 4 books are related to history. And by history, of course, I mean the history of my country, the history of Egypt. And of course, when you read such books and you try to understand the history of Egypt, you'll be feeling very amazed. Egypt has been, as always, the victim of its geography, the presence of Egypt in the middle of the world, whether this world is the old world that we knew up till the late 18th century with the discovery of the United States of America or of the Americas, or now when Egypt is still in the middle of the world, the whole world. And yes, Egypt is controlling the situation. It lies in the corner in the northern easternmost coast of Africa and acting as a connecting bridge between Asia and Africa. And at the same time, it lies on the southern border of the Mediterranean with big, huge shores that are overlooking the old civilization of Europe and the modern Europe, of course. And of course, Egypt has its shores on the Red Sea, with great connection with the Arab Peninsula and with Asia and with Africa to the south. So, such a great country, can it be a victim of geography? Yes, definitely it could be a victim of geography, because its important site and its important place in the world will make it always an important place in the history of the world. It's going always to be an important place for the economy of the world, connecting the whole world together. When Egypt is strong, it's very easy for Egypt to become not only an autonomous state, but a great state, an empire, a country that is full of dignified people who are overlooking the east and west and north and south with great confidence. Yes, this is Egypt. So, when you read the history books, you will always find that when Egypt is strong, it is curing all its surroundings. It is not acting as a tyrant or as in tyranny, in control of the situation of the whole world. No, it's a country that has been always undergoing a lot of trade with its neighbors and making a lot of relationships with all its partners all over the world. Egypt has been an empire, has been a strong kingdom, and has been a strong state ever since Egypt has been there. And yes, Egypt has been there as a state for the past 7,000 years. And Egypt, with the great autonomy from the time of the old kingdom, has proved to itself that if it includes itself only in its own borders, it will be the victim of geography. The countries surrounding Egypt are going to invade it, and they can be either the Hyksos who are coming from the east, who have invaded Egypt, and it was up to Ahmose the first, or the famous King Ahmose, who came from Thebes, from the south part of Egypt, trying to control the situation and kick out all these tribes that were ruling Egypt at that hard times, and started the 18th dynasty. It was up to Thutmose III who found out that in order to have a strong country like Egypt, he has to build a kingdom, an empire, that reaches its borders to the northern east part. It's not necessarily that the Egyptians are there to control or to rule and divide these tribes that are living, or these kingdoms that are living in their neighbors, but to have strong relationships with them. Yes, Thutmose III always every year would go on a tour of invasion to the northern part of the northern eastern neighbors. But when he comes back, he comes with the children of these tribes, where he teaches them, educate them, and give them proper education, and send them back to their countries with great confidence and great faith in Egypt, making them not just small toys to be ruled, but educated and highly educated people who come from the people of themselves, and at the same time have a great confidence in the Egyptians. Yes, Egypt has been a great state, and I think it will always be a great state. Today I'm going to give you an idea about books that I feel that are more or less related to Egypt and more or less are related to the history of Egypt. And these 4 books will take them chronologically, and we are going to start with Egypt, the Mamluk Egypt, or مصر المملوكية قراءة جديدة دكتور هاني حمزة. And this is talking about Egypt at the Mamluks' time. The second book will be the love affairs of Napoleon Bonaparte. It's not necessary to delineate how was Napoleon Bonaparte dealing with the women he know, but as much as we take a glimpse of this man character, because this man had a great control of Egypt for at least 3 years, but the effect of the French expedition to Egypt has lasted until today. So we'll talk about Napoleon Bonaparte, not just his women and his wives, but also about Napoleon Bonaparte in Egypt. A third book, which I believe it is related to the 19th century, which is مصر في عهدي عباس وسعيد by Dr. زين العابدين شمس الدين نجم. And this is a book about Egypt during the reign of Abbas I and Said in the 19th century, a period from 1849 or 1848 until 1863, the reign of 2 important governors of Egypt, Abbas and Said, who really we didn't have a great glimpse on their life because they have been always overshadowed by Muhammad Ali and by Ismail. So what happened in this crucial 15 years from 1848 to 1863 are the topic of this book. And the last but not least is a book about Egypt in the 80s of the 20th century. It's a great gentleman and a great writer, a man with a lot of principles who kept his principles to the last moment of his life, a real fresh and a friendly journalist who has been always committed to acting as a socialist, and his name is Salah Isa. سلامي عليك يا زمان مشاغبات وهموم صحفي عربي في الثمانينات. And this say, may I give the greetings to my time, the times and the fears of an Arabic journalist in the 80s of the 20th century. So today we are dealing with actually a great period of Egypt from the 13th century till the end of the 20th century with a world of books. Please stay with us, stay tuned to FM 95.4 from Radio Cairo in this beautiful warm afternoon wherever you are. So today is the world of books, and today we're going to discuss some historical books of Egypt as I've just mentioned before, and we'll start right away chronologically with مصر المملوكية or the Mamluk Egypt. And it's a new reading by Dr. Hani Hamza. So who are really the Mamluks, and why this system has been adopted by the Egyptians, and why and by the Arabs, and why it really survived for a very long period. So when was the Mamluk Egypt in reign or in power? It started from the year 1250 up till the year 1517 with 2 really well designated what we call states. We don't want to call them dynasties because we always say the saying that was used by the Mamluks or by the early Mamluks that said the ruling is sterile, or the king is sterile. He's not sterile, of course, he has his children, but the ones who are really in power are the strong Mamluks. So it's always the rule for the strongest, even if the ruler is the son of the strong king. He can be a puppet or he can be overthrown. So always the strengths go to the strong, or the rule of the country goes to the strong. So how was this system really started, and how was it adopted? Well, if we go through the history of Islam and the history of the Arabs, the Bedouin Arabs, who has taken up the Islam and started going as strong Egyptian Muslim armies to the north from the Arab Peninsula, carrying their strong faith and carrying their Bedouin style and their braveness, and at the same time extreme faith in the religion, they were able in no time not to invade but to swarm the northern part, that is of course the Fertile Crescent, as we call Iraq and Syria and Palestine, and even go to Egypt and furtherly go to the east to Persia. And these strong Bedouin tribes who carried the faith in their hearts, the strength in their horse and their knighthood, were able to convince a lot of people, as they have seen them and examined them, to take up Islam as their faith. They never forced anyone to Islam, and Islam has really spread by the easiness and by the forgiveness of the religion and of the Quran, and its acceptance of all types of people. Taking the Prophet, famous Prophet Muhammad ﷺ saying, which says, لا فرق بين عربي وأعجمي إلا بالتقوى. There is no difference between an Arab or a foreigner except with the type of faith that he is carrying. If they carry the same faith, then they are all equal. And by carrying the same faith is very simple, is obeying God and following the 4 pillars of Islam, the 5 pillars of Islam, which are very simplified and easily followed by all the Muslims, which they can take up and at the same time can live in a really peaceful life. So the definition of a Muslim is the person who people are safe from his hand and from his tongue. People, not just Muslims, brothers, but also people. Anyone who the people are safe from his hand and from his tongue can be a great Muslim. So what happened? Well, these Bedouins, as they reached these fertile lands and became the rulers, formed a real controlling, shall we say, a special type of people. They are the ruling, specially chosen part, and they are the governing families. So by time they became more at ease. They stopped being the strong knights of the desert, and they have taken up the peaceful life of the crescent, of the Fertile Crescent. And so as they lived and started enjoying their lives, they said they are not really ready to mount on their horses and go as the Bedouin, as their fathers and their grandfathers were. So these Arabs, who were the Abbasids or the Umayyads or the Abbasids, decided in the start to use up real strong soldiers of fortune who are good Muslims and who have these strong Bedouin hearts. But where can you get these conscripts? Well, in the West, we are talking to the West, when the Muslim armies went to the West towards the Moroccan areas and what's now known as Tunisia, Algeria and Morocco, and further north to Andalusia or Spain, it depended on the Berber tribes, who were strong knights and very great warriors, who were able, after taking up Islam, to become convinced with that and started going west and northwards, and of course invading all this and spreading Islam. But in the east, these strong warriors are far away. So what will be the source of these warriors? Well, the source of these warriors are the Turkish tribes. And by the way, there is always a great mixture between the word Turkish and the present-day Turkey. Because the present-day Turkey, the Turkish people who are living in these borders of this present-day Turkey, or the Republic, the modern Republic of Turkey, originally, until the 15th century, with the invasion of Constantinople, these people were in majority either Byzantine, or the Turkish tribes were not really in control of the situation until the falling of of Constantinople in the 1453, in the hands of these tribes. So the origin of these Turkish warriors were actually from what is now known as the 5 republics of Asia Minor, and these including, for example, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan. All these areas had very strong warriors. They are having a lot of Bedouin traits. They are fearless, they are motivated, they are true Muslims, and they are fighters by nature, and they are tough fighters because they have been living in harsh weather conditions and in harsh environment. So when this Islam spread to this, they acted as a sort of the first seed for becoming the Mamluk force. In the beginning they were used up in the Abbasid dynasty at the start, but later on, during the reign of the famous Ayyubid, they started to import this strong race of people who are really very fit for fighting and very good faithful Muslims. When they came to Egypt, it was during the reign of the last king of the Ayyubid, and this is Salih Nigmuddin Ayyub. He has taken up his own personal guards and his own personal elite force from these Turkish soldiers. And as I explained, these Turkish soldiers are not necessarily from what is now known as New Turkey or the Republic of Turkey, but from these Asia Minor states, present-day states. So these tribes or these slaves, they were bought as slaves in a very early age. Salih Nigmuddin didn't abuse them, didn't treat them as slaves, but he has given them very proper education. And the education was including Islam, culture, and of course armored skills and tactics and everything. And they were put in a very beautiful island which is now called the Manyel Rhoda Island, and in this island in the Nile, that is the southern part, the southern island or south to the Zamalek Island, this island they were called, because it was surrounded by water from all sides, it was called Bahari Mamluks. Their barracks were in the Bahari area or in an island. So these Mamluks, of them we have the great names of Aybak, and of course Aqtai, Zahir Babers, and Saifuddin Qutuz. All these strong Mamluks belonged to Salih Nigmuddin, the last of the Ayyubid. Actually, the last of the Ayyubid was his son Turan Shah, but he was not in control of the situation except for a very short period, and actually he was killed by the Mamluks of his father. So when we talk about these Mamluks, these strong Mamluks, including one of them is the wife of Salih Nigmuddin Ayyub, the famous Shajarat al-Durr, this was the start of the Mamluks. So when you talk about the Mamluk reign in Egypt from 1250, you have to start with Shajarat al-Durr, the queen, the lady, the wife of Salih Nigmuddin, the lady who was able to simply change the rules of the equation. When her husband died in his tent as he was defending Mansoura from the invasion of Louis IX of France in Mansoura and Dumyat, she simply has hidden the news of the death of the Sultan, refused to inform anyone about it, and went on explaining to everyone that he's still alive. Holding the stamp of the general, she would go inside the tent and stamp the orders, and she would have a meeting under the name and the auspice of the dead Sultan with the Mamluks. And by these Mamluks, we are talking about great, miraculous armed leaders, and of course these are the generals, Zahir Babers and Saifuddin Qutuz, who were very brave and very strong and very faithful and full of love of their cause and the nobility of the cause of defending Egypt from the invaders. In no time she was able to collect herself and defeat not only the invading French crusaders, but even to arrest their ruler Louis IX, and he was arrested and released later on with a handsome ransom. Unfortunately, Shajarat al-Durr couldn't rule for a longer time because she received a letter from the Abbasid, and in the Abbasids, of course, we have to discuss what happened. The letter that came. So Shajarat al-Durr received a letter from the Abbasid Khalif saying to her, "If you don't have men in Egypt, we can send you one." Wow, that's a very bad statement. That's a very bad sentence. That's a very bad letter. The lady has just saved Egypt from the invasion, and she received this letter. What could she do? We're talking about the medieval period. We're talking about 1250. Well, Unfortunately, she had to take up a husband because her husband now was married, and she took Aybak, considering him one of the weakest Mamluks, as a husband. And always, I told you before that usually these Mamluks of that time, no one of them was weak, no one of them was less ambitious than the other, no one of them was less brave than the other. They were very brave generals and officers. So simply he pretended that he's weak, then he took up her as a wife, kept her in the harem, and started his reign as a king. Now, when he ruled as a king, he didn't only just omit the role of Shajar al-Durr, but he even thought of getting married to one of the Abbasid princes in order to give legitimacy to his reign. And of course, Shajar al-Durr, as any lady, felt very jealous, and she decided to get rid of the man before he get married, and she totally would disappear from the theater of the events in Egypt. So what happened? She killed him and used the wooden slippers to get rid of him. His wife, or his first wife, of course, was very angry, and she decided that she's going to kill Shajar al-Durr. And Shajar al-Durr was killed, thrown out of the citadel, and later on buried after her body has decayed. Well, it's a very bad end for a queen of the Mamluks, the first Mamluk Sultan, or the first Mamluk queen. Well, this is actually the thing that happened. The Mamluks always reigned Egypt through this cascade of events. Usually it is for those who are strong. Only a Mamluk dares to win, and always charge as a Mamluk, as the famous European famous saying. It's always say, if you want to be brave, charge as a Mamluk. It's the strength, the bravery, the type of character anyway. So when Shajar al-Durr died, and later Aybak was killed, of course, before her, it was a period of turmoil. And the Mughals were on the road coming to invade Egypt after invading and destroying Baghdad, and after mutilating Damascus. They were met by the two famous Mamluk generals, and by this I mean Saifuddin Qutuz, who was the Sultan at that time, and Zahir Baybars, who acted bravely and of course with a great wit and charm were able to defeat the Mughals. On the way back, Zahir Baybars felt that Saifuddin Qutuz would get rid of him, so he just killed Saifuddin Qutuz. And so the Mamluk generals went and saw the dead body of the Sultan Saifuddin Qutuz. And their senior general said, "Who killed this Sultan?" So Zahir Baybars, as brave as always, said, "I did. So you are going to be the next Sultan." Wow. So this is the start of the Mamluk dynasty. And Zahir Baybars actually was one of the strongest people who have ever ruled Egypt. He ruled Egypt from 1260 till 1277. This was not the end of the Salihiyya Mamluk. The Salihiyya Mamluk, we mean the Mamluks of the Salih. And the first part of the book of Masr al-Mamlukiyya, or Egypt, the Mamluk of Egypt, by Dr. Hani Hamza, is describing the first dynasty, or the Bahari Mamluks. Because after Zahir Baybars died, unfortunately poisoned by a poison that he was not supposed to drink, two of his sons ruled Egypt for a very short period, and then Egypt has fallen in the hands of one of the great Mamluks of Salah al-Din, and by this I mean Sultan Qalawun. And yes, Sultan Qalawun is a great man, and he has really decided to build his own dynasty. So from 1280, from the year 1290 or 1280, of course, we can find that the people who ruled Egypt from 1280 until the end of the Qalawun grandchildren, the year 1354, we can find until that period, until the year 1389. So for almost 100 years and even more, we can find people who are related to Sultan Qalawun, whether these were his children, his grandchildren, or their great-great-grandchildren. So he could be called the Bahri Mamluks or simply the Qalawun dynasty. So how these sultans acted or fared, how they were really great builders or not, how strong they were or weak, how much puppet they were or strong they were, we can always see great names in the middle. Of course, Qalawun was a great builder. In such a very short period, from 1279 till 1290, he ruled Egypt until his death, and he built in just 2 years a great complex that is surviving up till today. Not only a mausoleum for his family, but a mosque, and not only a mosque, but a school and a place for water ablation and for water, and a hospital that is still working up till now. From 1280 until today, this hospital or this place in this hospital has been working for the past almost 800 years. So Salih Najmuddin Nasr Qalawun, Mansur Qalawun, was a great man. His son Khalil, who ruled Egypt for 3 years, from 1290 onwards till 1293, until he was killed, and watch the word killed, has ruled Egypt, but he was the one who finished up the Crusaders in the Middle East by defeating the last of the Crusaders and opening up and conquering Akka or Akron. So after that, the Hospitallarians, who were the Crusaders who were living in Akka, had to leave, and they left to Crete, Cyprus, and then Malta in the end. So after Khalil came Nasr Muhammad, who ruled 3 times, put on the throne and left, and put again and left, until he ruled Egypt when he was a strong man. So talking about the Mamluk Egypt, the Mamluks of Egypt, is very important, because Egypt has had these Mamluk dynasties, or several rulers of the Mamluks, until the year 1517, with the invasion of the Ottomans, where Egypt has been invaded. And why Egypt was invaded? Because simply the Egypt at that time was bankrupt, because after the discovery of the Cape of Good Hope, Egypt has been derived of the money that could take out of this commerce of the whole world. Egypt has become weak and unable to keep the strength of its armies, and therefore was easily defeated by the advancing Ottomans from 1517 until 1798, with the arrival of Napoleon Bonaparte. So reading a book about Mamluks is very interesting as a start to talk about medieval Egypt. How should we grasp this period? How should we deal with this period as a sort of enlightenment, a strong country, a strong state, a strong empire, with a lot of weaknesses coming from within as from without? The Mamluk Egypt by Dr. Hani Hamza, a book that deserves to be read. So after the break, we'll get to more about books of history. So we are talking still in the world of books, and the next book is the Napoleon Bonaparte Love Affairs. Well, this is an interesting book. It's always interesting to read about Napoleon Bonaparte. Why? Because this man has really changed the face of the world. We can always designate life before, or the world before Napoleon Bonaparte and afterwards. Why? Because he was a real man of state. Whether he was successful to form an empire which was very short-lived, or was he able to change the face of the whole world? Yes, he was. He changed the characters of the people. He has put his own laws there. We can still see the effect of Napoleon Bonaparte on the, as we call the law of Napoleon, the state decree, the things that he went in, the distance he covered all through his life with much lack of technology, his tactics, his strategy. He's still a champion and hero in the hearts of the French people up till today. And if people look at Napoleon Bonaparte, they still, in spite of the fact that he was defeated, humiliated, and exiled, and died exiled twice and died in exile, yet with the famous statistics and census, it is really agreed that Napoleon Bonaparte still lives in the hearts of the French people. So how much Napoleon Bonaparte affected our history? It's definitely a great effect. In his short life, he came to Egypt as a general and as the leader of the expedition, of the French expedition to Egypt from 1798 till 1801. And actually, he stayed only for less than 2 years. He left Egypt after the invasion of Egypt and his failure to invade the Syrian parts, and he left Egypt to the two of his generals, Kleber, and then, of course, after the death of Kleber, to Mino. So, what was the effect of Napoleon in Egypt? It attracted the attention of the whole world to Egypt, the potentials of Egypt, the importance of Egypt, and at the same time the fact that Egypt has a very important strategic point. And of course, people always say that Napoleon Bonaparte has introduced the printer to Egypt. But actually, yes, he introduced the printer to Egypt, but he took it with him when he went back. So he didn't keep it. It was up to Muhammad Ali to have his own print house and to build and print on it. So they were not coming here for the benefit of Egypt, for the benefit of the country. They were coming here to build an empire. Yes, at that time he was defeated by the other empire, which was then Britain. The Britain has held hands with the Ottomans at that time, but actually Egypt was a victim between two important strong empires who were trying to defeat Egypt or take Egypt to be part of their jewels of the crown. When we talk about Napoleon Bonaparte love affairs, well, we know for sure that he got married twice, to Josephine and to Marie Louise, actually the niece of Marie Antoinette, which is a very big exclamation mark. And yes, when we talk about his love affair with Josephine, we'll see and feel that she betrayed him, he betrayed her, and it was a love-hate relationship all through it. Napoleon Bonaparte suffered very much with his deep love to Josephine and with his knowledge that she was betraying him with a lot of people. And perhaps this has motivated him to have strong relations or contemporary or short-lived relations with a lot of women all his life. What's so interesting about this book is that we will know that Napoleon Bonaparte had a legitimate child, that is the L'Aiglon, or the young Napoleon, who died from tuberculosis afterwards, and he was the only legitimate child of Napoleon. But Napoleon had children from these relations, especially one child from the Polish countess, and this child in particular had a lot of strengths and character of Napoleon Bonaparte, that he was himself during his end of his life a secretary of or a foreign minister of the French government during the reign of Napoleon III, his cousin. So of course he didn't carry the name of Napoleon, but it was proved through genetic testing done to the children and the grandchildren of this count, the Polish count, that he was a child of Napoleon. Napoleon even had, from other relationship, a daughter that died in the early 20th century. So this is really interesting. But what's interesting to us is that Napoleon didn't have a relation, as it is commonly said here, that he had a relation with an Egyptian lady. This didn't happen. No. He had a relation with one of the wives of the French army that was with him here. And he kept a strong relation with this lady, and he sent even her husband in the direction of danger. Anyway, this is interesting stories about a man who has a very, very well defined place in the history of the world. Napoleon Bonaparte has affected the history of the world, but has affected in particular the history of Egypt. Nobody knows whether if he didn't invade Egypt, what happened or what could have happened without him. Well, it was an exposure. It was eye-opening for the Egyptians for a technology that they never thought that it existed. And therefore, when Muhammad Ali came to power after the vacuum of the withdrawal of the French forces and the English force and the British forces, it was a fertile land for Muhammad Ali to build a great empire with the use of the Egyptian people, who really were shocked by getting exposed to the modern world of the French and of the whole world after 400 years of great inhibition and suppression by the Ottomans, who have invaded Egypt in 1517 till 1798, taking Egypt and excluding it and keeping it in the medieval period. So the eye-opening of the French invasion to Egypt, with all its catastrophic changes, has affected the minds and the hearts of the Egyptians by knowing that it is time to wake up. So after the break, we'll talk about Muhammad Ali. So we're talking about Muhammad Ali. When after the vacuum of the withdrawal of the French forces and the British forces, came Muhammad Ali to power. And Muhammad Ali was a young officer sent by the Ottomans to fill this vacuum with the Ottoman army that came to Egypt. Muhammad Ali was a shrewd man, a man of a great intelligence and a man of a great will, a strong character, a man who was really full of great confidence of himself. He educated himself, he knew a lot about Egypt, and he has changed the whole country into a country that is the root of, or the seed of, a great empire. A man who knew quite well, if you want to build an army, if you want to build an empire, you have to have a strong army. And if you need to have a strong army, then you have to have doctors, engineers, architects, chemists, veterinarians, everything, administrative workers. So he knew that you can only build an army through education. And you, in order to get the education, you have to import the educators, or to send people to get educated abroad. And he has sent very well chosen Egyptians by himself to get best learning and best education. And as we know now, the famous way of calling training of the trainers. He trained these trainers very well, sent them to give them a lot of scholarships, and he gave them a lot of proper education in order to help him to build this empire. In no time he was able to build an empire that reached the walls of Istanbul. And he has made Egypt into a modern world. Yes, he was a great abuser. He abused his Egyptian army. He abused his soldiers. And he had a great son, the first son of him, that is Ibrahim Pasha, a man of great wit, charm, and iron will, and a great leader, a tactician, strategist, and a man, unfortunately, who died before his father. Ibrahim had great confidence in the Egyptians, and should he have lived, Egypt would have changed into a better country. Egypt would have changed into a better, strong country if Ibrahim lived. But unfortunately, Ibrahim died in 1848 before the death of his father. And it was up to the second in command to rule Egypt, and that was Abbas I. And Abbas I was a very bad man. According to the rules of inheritance, he was the eldest of the Muhammad Ali family, and therefore he was put to the throne. Muhammad Ali has invested a lot of time and education in Abbas, but unfortunately Abbas was a bad person. And he ruled Egypt for only 6 years, and Egyptians were so fed up of him, and not only the Egyptians, but the Muhammad Ali family itself were fed up from him, and they decided to kill this paranoid governor, and they killed him in 1854. After Abbas came Said, the one who accepted the terms, the harsh terms of Ferdinand de Lesseps to dig Suez Canal. So it was in digging the Suez Canal, and the Egyptians who were forced to work in this canal, and these harsh conditions that were signed on by Said would put us into the imagination that how far Abbas and Said have really were able to, in just 15 years, to destroy all the hopes of building a great country. A country that was built and well kept by Ibrahim Pasha, built by Muhammad Ali, by the aid and the strength of Ibrahim Pasha. And unfortunately, with the premature death of Ibrahim and with the aging of Muhammad Ali, Egypt has fallen into the hands of two ignorant rulers who have really affected Egypt and destroyed the great state of Muhammad Ali and the great family of the great country that would have been built. Yes, of course, 1840 London Treaty, which has reduced and shrunk the power of Muhammad Ali rule on only to Egypt and Sudan. Yet, with that alone, should Ibrahim have lived, life would have been much different in the Nile Valley. So today we were able to present 3 books. The book of Masr al-Mamlukiyya, a new reading by Dr. Hani Hamza, Egyptian Mamluk, or Mamluk Egypt. The second book, The Love Affairs of Napoleon Bonaparte. And the third book, Egypt in the time and life of Abbas and Said. So, more books to be read about and discussed about. These 3 books, particular books, dealing with Egypt, should be read. My advice to you, if you find them and they are available in the market, try to read them. As the famous words of Abbas Mahmoud Aqad, when he said, if you read about Egypt, if you read history, you will add more years to your time and you will add more wisdom. So, History of Egypt and the World of Books was the title of our program today in the World of Info. My name is Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad was at the controls. I was coming to you live from FM 95.4, Studio 3, and I look forward to see you next week, same station, same time, from 4 to 5 next Thursday. Have a lovely weekend.